Hello guys, welcome to one more video. Thank you so much for visiting my channel. Have you ever heard someone tell you that they speak Spanish, for example, on B2 level or Russian on C1 level? If you are a polyglot or a language lover, you definitely know what are these levels. But something that surprised me a lot is the fact that most of the people, or at least those people who are not very interested in languages, don't know what these different levels mean, or they don't know that there are several levels of language proficiency. This was very surprising for me. I guess that when your whole life is about languages, you're sometimes surprised that the rest of the world doesn't think the same and they're not interested in the same things. So recently I have met few people who, in conversation with them, I mentioned that I speak certain language on B2 level, and they were like, what's B2? And then I realized that most of the planet does not know much about different levels of language proficiency. That's why I decided to dedicate this video to explaining what does it mean to speak language on A1, A2, B1, B2, and C1, C2 level. Because apparently it's not something that's well known among people, as I previously thought. So I would like to discuss that a little bit with you today, and I'm sure that many of you who follow me already know what are these things, but still, please keep watching my video and give me a like or subscribe to my channel if you're not subscribed already. That means so much to me, and let's start. As I already mentioned, there are 6 levels of language proficiency: A1, A2, B1, B2, and C1, C2. Sounds very simple, right? It is simple. A levels, or A1 and A2, are also known as basic user, meaning that you can speak a language on a basic level. B1 and B2 are also known as independent user. People who speak language on B1 and B2 level can kind of discuss certain topics without thinking too much about them. And then C1 and C2 are known as the highest levels of language proficiency. Therefore, people who speak certain language on this level are called proficient users. Level A1 is logically the beginning. It is the most basic level of speaking a language. I personally love to call A1 tourist language, because imagine a situation where you want to go for a vacation to Italy, for example, and you think that it might be cute to learn basic Italian phrases to be able to interact with Italians on your trip, but you have no ambition to learn anything else but those few phrases. So people who speak certain language on A1 level have very limited vocabulary. They usually are able to form very basic sentences, like to tell their name, to ask someone what's their name, to ask someone how are you, or maybe to ask where's pizzeria, for example, if they're learning tourist Italian. This is the beginner level, and we are all starting there. When discussing or when speaking a certain language on A1 level, the most important thing to have, in my opinion, is very patient person to talk to. Since this is beginner level, person who speaks A1 language won't be able to understand that much, especially if they're talking to native speaker who speaks fast. They also won't be able to discuss anything else but the most basic things, which I mentioned previously. So this is beginner's level, which is great, but I would not definitely consider A1 level of language proficiency to be speaking a language. For me, that's just beginning to learn something. But if you speak any language on A1 level, you're great, but I think you should continue learning. Once you reach A2 level in certain language, your self-confidence is definitely gonna grow compared to the times when you were A1, but you still won't be self-confident enough to independently speak with someone, especially not with native speaker. Your vocabulary is going to be a little bit bigger, so you might be able to ask for directions, for example, or if you are traveling somewhere, you might be able to understand certain signs on the street and so on, but you still won't be able to discuss anything else except those few limited topics. Again, on A2 level, you will still need a very patient native speaker or very patient speaker to discuss with you, because you are not going to be able to keep up with a normal conversation. So you are definitely not fluent yet on A2 level, but you're closer to it than ever before. B1 level is level where I would say that fun begins, because you are finally considered an independent user. That means that you can feel self-confident, you can already speak with native speakers, they don't have to be too patient with you, because if you speak a language on a B1 level, that means that you are very likely to understand normal, average conversation about some general topics. This doesn't mean that you will understand every single word people are saying, but you will definitely understand what are they talking about. You will also be able to feel more relaxed when talking about certain topics. Of course, you won't be able to talk about topics that you're not too familiar with. And in my case, for example, what I have noticed about myself is that when I'm learning a new language, I'm always learning things that I'm very interested in first. So for example, if I'm learning, I don't know, when I was learning Italian, and when I was past A or beginner level, when I started getting into B level, the first things that I was learning, because I wanted to, were things that I was interested in. So for example, like politics and words from that related to politics, cooking, and things that I like. But at that level, I was still not able to speak about things that I'm not too interested in. So B1 level is great. I know that in some countries, in order to live and study and work there, B1 level is enough, which from my own experience, I'm not sure if it's really enough, but by government institutions, it's usually considered enough. So if you want to move to a new country, or to study somewhere, you cannot do that without B1 level. B2 level is, I would say, very serious achievement, because by most of the standards, B2 level is already gonna make you a fluent speaker. People will consider you a fluent speaker. You won't be mixed for native speaker for sure, but you will definitely be able to be relaxed while talking to native speakers. You won't have to search for words anymore, which is something that usually happens when you first start learning a language and you have conversation and you know that you knew some word but you can't remember at the time. At B2 level, that's something that shouldn't happen. You will still make mistakes. I would say mostly grammar mistakes, at least that's how it was from my own experience. But in case of B2 level, since you are already kind of familiar with language, those mistakes are you're probably going to be aware of those mistakes. And sometimes what happens to me, if I speak a language on B2 level, I will say something and I will immediately realize that was wrong. So I will correct myself. That is something that usually doesn't happen with those previous levels. When I was studying in Prague, I had to have Czech language on B2 level in order to be able to get to university. I know that in some companies, B2 level of English, for example, is required if you want to work there. The same thing applies for many other languages in a case you want to work or study in that language. And definitely it is a high level of language knowledge. How long it takes to achieve this level, I'm not sure, because it always depends on how good you are with languages, how similar that language is to your native one, and how much time you invest into language learning. In my case, I would say that for a good B2 level, 1 year or let's say 9 months is enough. But I have to disappoint many people by saying that even though B2 level is officially considered as enough to study somewhere or to work in a company using that language, I would say that it's gonna be a little bit tricky in the beginning, because even though you speak that language really well, once they put you in a room full of native speakers who speak among themselves, you will be a little bit confused at first. You will overcome it. You will be able to, integrate kinda into their society. But in the beginning, it's still gonna be tricky. That's why, in my opinion, you should continue and go on and push very hard, try very hard to reach next level, which is C1. C1 level is something that once you reach it, you can stop being modest, you can start bragging about being the most amazing human on the planet because you speak certain language on C1 level. You are a considered proficient user, which means that you can talk to anyone, native speakers, non-native speakers, without any problem. Your grammar is great, not perfect because, sometimes even native speakers don't have perfect grammar, but it's very good. You can discuss any topic that you are interested or not interested in. And I don't know how many people are going to agree with me on this, but I believe that C1 level of language proficiency can only be reached in a case you either live in a country where that language is spoken and you are interacting with native speakers every day, or you are some kind of person who is surrounded with certain language on daily basis without living in a country. In my case, this happened with Czech language, which I have to say it took me at least 2 years for me to be totally self-confident when speaking Czech, which I believe that feeling self-confidence when speaking certain language only happens once you reach C1. And it really does take time. It doesn't even matter how smart and good with languages you are, because languages take time, especially when you want to speak them in a completely relaxed way, and especially if they come natural. If you want them to come naturally to you, you have to spend time surrounded with that language. And I have met people who claim that they speak certain languages, few of them on C1 level, and they only learn them for like 4, 5, 6 months. And every time I hear that, I'm like, no, you don't speak that language on C1 level for such a short period of time. I think it's impossible. And of course, some people are very self-confident about their language knowledge, and I don't want to criticize them about that. But in my opinion and from my own experience, if you want to speak C1 level of language, you better move to the country where that language is spoken. And the last level is C2 level. At this point, you are completely perfect. You have reached your goal. Great job. This is a point where you can probably find yourself thinking in that language sometimes, even though it's not your native language. You are able to hold any kind of conversation. You will probably never get confused when someone asks you something. And one more really important thing is that you will have a knowledge of slang or colloquialisms in certain language. And this is very important, because you can speak certain language very well, but you can still get confused when you hear certain slang words that native speakers use. So on C2 level, this is something that you are very familiar with, so you can definitely not get confused by those words. I have seen that in cases of many languages, C2 level is sometimes referred to as native speaker or native speaker level, which I'm not sure if it's really correct way to call it, because first of all, what is native speaker? There are certain native speakers who are not that educated, and they definitely don't speak their native language equally as someone who is highly educated and good with words. So I personally avoid calling C2 level native speaker level, but I have seen that in many cases that is how they call it. So I guess that's it. If you reach C2 level, you can consider yourself like a native speaker. I want you to let me know what languages you speak and on what level, in a case you know it, because for example, in my case, the only language that I did like an exam for is Czech, because I had to, and that was like 100 years ago. I had B2 level, which was necessary for me to get to university, but then my Czech, of course, got way better because I lived there for some time. In a case of all the other languages, I have never done any kind of exam, because in my case, languages are fun and lifestyle more than something that I have to, get a proof of and display for everyone. I have seen that in many places online there are certain tests which are supposed to tell you what's your level in certain language. Many of those tests are not really relevant in my opinion, but I think they're great if you want to have fun and, you know, just test yourself to see where roughly are you. So guys, I hope you liked my video. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about this topic? Did you know all this? If you're a polyglot, you definitely did. But if you are not a polyglot and you somehow came across my channel, in a case you liked my video, please give me a like, comment, subscribe to my channel. I have no words to describe how grateful I am every time I see a new person subscribing to my channel or a new like or new comment, and I think this is something that happens to everyone on YouTube who has a small channel and is trying to grow. So please make me happy today and let me know in the comments how much you liked my video. I hope you liked it a lot and I hope you're gonna be here next week. Thank you so much and see you.